Ukraine has endured the trial of war, unbroken, unwavering. Its people face invasion and crimes against humanity, yet still lift their eyes in faith, holding fast to hope and justice. Because culture survives in the simplest things: a song, a language, a quiet act of courage. Ukraine stands vigilant against Russian aggression, and among its defenders are not only soldiers, but guardians of truth. One of them is Oleksandra Matviichuk, Nobel Peace Prize laureate, human rights lawyer and head of Ukraine's Center for Civil Liberties. Above Kiev, the motherland rises, steel against the sky. On the front lines, soldiers hold the flag and move forward. In shelters underground, families wait. Fearful of what comes next, yet hopeful that justice will prevail. Every effort, every case, every testimony serves one purpose: accountability and an end to the war.
Oleksandra, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. It's an honor and a privilege to have you here.
Thank you for the invitation.
So I'd like to start off with the topic of international justice. Now, Ukraine is a full member of the International Criminal Court, state party to the Rome Statute. Arrest warrants exist, of course, but the crimes against Ukraine committed by Russia continue, and still justice remains uncertain. When people hear international justice, they assume that there's a system that works. And from where you sit, what's the biggest misunderstanding about how justice actually functions in wartime?
The problem is more global. The world order, which, based on UN Charter and international law, has collapsed before our eyes. This system was created after the Second World War to prevent wars and mass violence, but now it's just stalling and reproducing ritualistic movements. For obvious reason, even my smartphone has an expiration date. The system has never been reformed. So it's easy to predict that such fires like wars will emerge more and more often in different parts of the globe because this international wiring is faulty and sparks are everywhere. And justice is a part of this global system, and it's also under global storm and attack.
And the ICC has investigated crimes against humanity related to Euromaidan, the 2014 annexation of Crimea, and the war in Donbass. And of course, arrest warrants have been issued for several Russian leaders, including Vladimir Putin, Maria Bolova, and senior Russian military officials. But unfortunately, the reality is that the ICC doesn't have a formal enforcement mechanism. So it kind of leads me to a two-part question here, if you don't mind. What is the impact when those that are charged are protected by the states? And do the arrest warrants still actually have merit if they're unlikely to be enforced, at least in the near term?
For sure, International Criminal Court has no international police. So this arrest warrant, it's obligation of the states which are participants of the Rome Statute. But it has already made the world for Putin more smaller than previous one. What do I mean? In 2023, Putin was invited by President Ramaphosa to South Africa for the BRICS summit. But he didn't come because South Africa has vibrant civil society, and South Africa is a part of the Rome Statute. So he didn't feel himself comfortable. In 2022, situation repeated itself. President Putin was invited by President Lulu to Brazil for a G20 summit, and everything was repeated. Brazil has vibrant civil society. Brazil is a part of Rome Statute, and that's why Putin can come to Mongolia, which is stuck between Russia and China, or to other countries whose leaders promised him security. But even those leaders must to be aware that when they shake in Putin's hand, they shake in hand of the biggest child kidnapper in the world, and that's not political statement, it's legal statement.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, there's been some talk and conversations that I've had about this lack of enforcement capability of the ICC, and some have said that it presents this justice as an illusion, or does it actually provide actual frameworks for prosecuting these war crimes?
We have a lot of accountability gaps when we speak about justice. It doesn't mean that we have to give up. It just means that we have to develop the system and change it for better. Let's start with the visible one. I was in Kiev when Russian troops tried to circle my city. I refused to evacuate, and with a part of my team, we continued our work on the ground. It was very dramatic time because we don't know what will be tomorrow, and that is why we celebrated every morning like a victory, because we managed to stand just one more night. And we face with enormous amount of crimes because Russia uses war crimes as a methods of warfare. Russia deliberately provide enormous pain and suffering to Ukrainian civilians in order to break people's resistance and occupy the country. And I start to ask to myself, for whom we document these crimes for? Because there are these different accountability gaps, which I mentioned. And one of them, particularly, there is no international court which can prosecute Putin and top political leadership and high military command of the Russian state for the crime of aggression. Even International Criminal Court in The Hague has no such jurisdiction in situation of Russian war of aggression against Ukraine. But all this hell which we face in Ukraine, it's a result of total impunity, which Russia enjoyed for decades. And all these atrocities became possible only because Putin and his surrounding made this leadership decision to break the peace and to start this war. So that is why, for all this 4 years, we are promoting the idea to fill this accountability gap and to create a special tribunal on aggression. And it's not an easy thing to do, because in the whole history of humankind, we have only one such precedent when leaders were prosecuted for their leadership decision to start the war. It was Nuremberg Tribunal. All other tribunal, which we probably heard, like Yugoslavia Tribunal, Rwanda Tribunal, Special Court in Sierra Leone, I will simplify it, but it's where courts where people were judged because they killed each other not according to the norm of international humanitarian law. So if they killed each other according to the norm, there's really not prosecution. So it was the only one such precedent, and it was essential step to establish law and justice in past century, but it also established like a norma that justice is privileged to winners. And now we challenge this norma. We tell that we live in a new century, we cannot wait, and justice is not privilege. Justice is a basic human right.
Absolutely agree with that. I want to shift for a second now to a little bit from the institutional perspective that we've talked about to a more human one. Now, the organization that you run, the Center for Civil Liberties, or CCL, has documented countless occurrences of unlawful detention, torture, deportation, and more. And there are years of these horrible crimes that have been cataloged. And of course, the CCL documents these crimes with very extraordinary detail. What is the psychological or ethical toll on organizations like yours collecting this evidence, knowing that prosecutions may never happen or are years away?
We always tell the truth to people with whom we work, people affected by this war, that we have no guarantees, but there is no guarantees in anything in our life, but we have a chance, and we will do our best to use this chance, because our future is not just unclear, it's also not pre-written. This means that with our efforts, we still have a chance to build future which we want. And this is what provides us additional obligation and responsibility. I interviewed hundreds of people who survived Russian captivity. They told me how they were beaten, raped, smashed into wooden boxes, their fingers were cut, their nails were torn away, their nails were drilled, They were electrically shocked through their genitalia. One woman told me how her eye was dragged out with a spoon. So it's horrible stories. And we have in our questionnaire the question, did you apply to international organizations or to national legal enforcement bodies? And part of people answered no. And then on follow-up question, why you didn't apply, probably you need some assistance to do it. Part of people answer no again, because they told like this, we don't believe that justice will be served. Russia will never give these people for accountability. There is no sense in doing this. And then I asked them follow-up questions, but why in such a way you came to me? And suddenly we all understood that even those people who say that they have no hope, they still have a tiny one. They still have a hope that if something like justice will be possible, they want their story to be recorded. And it's a huge responsibility, because we have this hundreds of thousands of stories, and among them, a lot of stories where people not even shared with legal enforcement bodies or international organizations. They even didn't share these stories with their beloved ones. It's a huge responsibility.
And it's one that carries a ton of weight. Listening to you stirs a lot of emotion about this. And I want to ask you, along the same lines, a couple of questions about the injustices that you see quite often, which is the illegal detention of civilians who do not clearly fit into one of the categories that we normally hear of, the POW. They haven't been charged with any crimes. And this kind of puts them into a legal no man's land. When civilians are held outside of any recognized legal status, what does that say about the adequacy of the current legal framework? How do we deal with that?
Russia instrumentalized the pain. And when Russia occupied territories, Russia inflicted a terror against civilians there. They physically exterminated active local people on the ground. Mayors, journalists, children writers, teachers, environmentalists, any active people of community. And they share this message to majority: if you will be active and we will not recognize Russian occupation, you will follow the same horrible destiny. And that is why Russia legally detained dozens of thousands of civilians. According to international humanitarian law, Russia has no right to detain civilians, but Russia don't care about international humanitarian law. And the main problem is that the question of these people and generally human dimension, it's not a priority for political process. We don't hear during the peace talk about people at all. We just hear about natural minerals, Russia's territorial claims, geopolitical interest, but not about people. And that is why it's led to situations that the Trump's year of negotiation became the deadliest year for civilians in Ukraine. Because if you don't prioritize human dimension, it's a bright sign for Putin that he can do with civilians whatever he wants. And it's not just numbers. Let me humanize this with some concrete story. Last year, I met a young girl in Kiev. We worked with case of her mother. Her mother was civilian. They both live in occupied territories. Her mother was abducted because she has a pro-Ukrainian sympathy, which is not a crime to be a citizen of Ukraine, to love your country, but it's definitely a crime for Russia. And her mother was illegally detained and kept in inhuman conditions. She went through the multiple gang rape. Was horrible. What's horrible, the details of her case. And then she was illegally transported to Russia, and now she faced fabricated criminal case. She definitely will be sentenced for a huge amount of time, as other Ukrainian civilians did. So probably these adults who accompanied this young girl, told her that I am a big person because I'm a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. So she approached me, she hugged me, she started crying, and she started begging me, please return my mom. And I felt broken because I'm a professional human rights lawyer. I know pretty well human rights institutions, but I have no legal tools how to return the mom to a 5-year-old girl. And this is not just problem of Ukrainian human rights lawyer. It's our general problem, because if Putin can behave like this, while other authoritarian leaders can't.
Yeah, it sets a precedent that we don't want, and I apologize. That was to think of the story of this 5-year-old girl and the weight that you must have felt just in that moment. It's indescribable. Which makes me wonder, this question that I had in my head would actually be more probably of a statement that unlawful detention of civilians be treated more as a war crime and a crime against humanity rather than being viewed as some type of byproduct of war. Your thought?
There are several types of international crimes: war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and crime of aggression. I'm totally sure that Russia committed all these types because this war has very clearly genocidal intent. Putin openly says, there is no Ukrainian nation, there is no Ukrainian language, there is no Ukrainian culture. For 12 years, we have been documenting how these words converted in horrible practice in occupied territories, where Ukrainians have to be re-educated as Russians or killed. And that is why Russians physically exterminate active local people on the ground, even priests. They ban Ukrainian language and culture. They forcibly mobilize Ukrainian men to Russian army. They settled these territories deliberately with Russian citizens from different regions of Russia to change the demography of population. And they forcibly take dozens of thousands of Ukrainian children to Russia. They put them in Russian education camps. They told them, you're not Ukrainian, you're Russian children, your families, your parents refused from you, and you will be adopted by Russian families who will bring you up as Russians. And yes, I'm a lawyer. I know that genocide, it's very difficult to be proven in international courts because you have to prove the genocidal intent. But there is no necessity to be a lawyer just to look to situation from the common sense to understand a very simple thing. If you want, partially or completely, to destroy some national group, there is no necessity to kill all representatives of this group. You can just forcibly change their identity, and entire national group sooner or later will disappear. And that is why Ukrainians have no luxury to be tired. Even after 12 years of the war, we have no alternative. If we stop fighting and Russia will occupy the whole country, we will cease to exist. We'll disappear as a nation.
Yeah. The CCL has worked endlessly to demonstrate that civilian detention is not incidental, and rather that it's systemic. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, you've kind of demonstrated this now, but it's just
Let me illustrate it with a case of priest Stepan Podolchak. He lived in village Kalanchak in Kherson region. Part of Kherson region is under Russian occupation. Russians came to his house early morning and took the priest barefooted with a bag on his head and made everything in his home upside down. And after 2 days, they told that Stepan Podolchak died. Russians tortured priest Stepan Podolchak to death because previously he several times refused to transfer his church to Moscow Patriarchy. He told, I can't break my oath in my congregation. So this means to live under Russian occupation. You have no tools how to protect your right, your freedom, your property, your life, your children, your beloved ones. Russians can do everything which they want with you. And that is why when politicians discussed the problem of occupied territories, I feel anger because they speak about these territories like about empty spaces. But sorry, it's not empty spaces. Millions of Ukrainians live there. And okay, we can't release these territories by military force, but why are you even not trying to discuss a way how to make life people under Russian occupation more secure? Why are you totally not interested in the human conditions? We're all humans. I can't understand such behavior.
Yeah, I can't either. I bet anyone that's listening is probably taking the same thought that how do these people act like that? How is it even possible that people can see other humans and just not recognize them, just as you've said? And there have already been many actions that have been taken, such as freezing Russian assets, the implementations of reparations mechanisms, such as the reparations loan from the EU, and of course, many lawsuits. Can you give us some insight into the value of these actions as a means to help Ukraine?
There are a lot of things which must be done on the level of governments, but there are a lot of things which can be done on the level of ordinary people. We get used to thinking through the categories of states and interstates organizations, but ordinary people have a much great impact that they can even imagine. Ordinary people can change history. And let me illustrate it with an example. I mentioned that I was in Kiev when Russian troops tried to circle it. And that time, not only Putin, but our international partners were confident that Ukraine has no potential to resist, that just in 3 or 4 days, the whole country will fall. And I remember how international organizations evacuated their personnel. They left us alone. But ordinary people remained, and ordinary people started to do extraordinary things. It were ordinary people who took people out from their ruined cities. It were ordinary people who break through the encirclement to provide humanitarian aid. It were ordinary people who helped to survive under artillery's fire, and suddenly it became obvious that ordinary people fighting for their freedom and human dignity are stronger than even the second army in the world. And this is just a part of the story. Another part, which is also very important, that ordinary people in France, in Germany, in United States, in other countries of the world start to be vocal about this. They collect donations, they inform on their own social networks what's going on, they organized peaceful demonstrations, they urged the government to help Ukraine with weapons. We survived because of these people from different countries who didn't stay indifferent. We survived because of you, and we are very grateful. Unfortunately, we can't predict how long this war will take. This means that we still need support. And I just want to say that, yes, I can provide a list of things which United States, European Union, other countries can do to help to stop this war. But my main message is that all efforts matter. Sometimes people think, but okay, I will not be involved because my efforts very modest. There are no modest efforts during the large-scale war. All efforts matter.
It's brick by brick. Given what you see in the situation right now, what forms of justice might be achievable in the next few years if things go the way you want them to go?
We must make justice as an independent, parallel international track. I'm not naive. Russia will never sign any peace agreement with provision about accountability. Our main goal is not to put barriers for justice in peace agreement, because we remember that in this 28 points plan, which was presented by United States administration, it was a point about total amnesty. So we don't know how it will be look like, and that is why our strategy to make justice is in parallel track, because International Criminal Court, he will not stop its investigation despite everything which will be written in peace agreement. He will not withdraw arrest warrants against Vladimir Putin. We have to create several other international accountability mechanisms while we still have the window of opportunity, like special tribunal on aggression, which I mentioned before. And I'm glad to say that last year, Council of Europe announced the official start of the creation. We have to create international registry of damage to make it functioning properly. We have to make reparation credit from the 300 billions of dollars which are frozen in United States and European countries. Because it's very common logic. Aggressor must pay for the loss and destruction. Justice has also this financial side, and let's make Russia pay for it. And this is our main goal for current moment, because we don't know what window of opportunity we still have. Justice is not priority for the current presidential administration in United States. There is a lack of bravery among European leaders to make decisive legal actions. I think it's because they don't understand the meaning of justice. Because justice is not just about a past or about a future. Justice has a power like magic to strategically change reality. How it works? Russian troops committed horrible crimes in Chechnya, in Moldova, in Georgia, in Mali, in Libya, in Syria, in other countries of the world. They have never been punished. If even part of Russians start to be doubt that probably this time they will not avoid responsibility, that they will not hide under the figure of abstract Putin, that they will be personally responsible for their own actions, for their own decisions. Even if part of Russians start to be doubt, it will have a chilling effect of brutality of their actions. And because we speak about ongoing war, this means that just with decisive legal actions, we can save thousands and thousands of lives.
Yeah, these are great examples of how organizations like yours are implementing other methodologies to ensure pressure and accountability outside of the court system. I think it's creative and brave that you've been able to do that. I'd like to move on to a quick topic of legacy, if you wouldn't mind. When the courts look back at this moment in time over the last number of years and the struggle for Ukraine, and they ask, whether the world chose law or power, what's the evidence you hope that your work leaves behind?
I'm afraid that last year particularly, the world made a huge step back to the past. And let's be honest, this past wasn't great. This was a past where world is based not on rule of law, but on the will of strongest. And it's a very dangerous world to live in, because it means that just 3 or 4 countries dictate their will, and 99% of other countries have to just to fulfill it. It's a world which is dangerous even for strongest, because to be strongest, it's always a process. You have to prove that you are on the first place of hierarchy of violence. That's why citizens of these countries have always fight in different parts of the globe to prove it. And the world of strongest, we know it from the history of humankind. It's always the world of wars and mass violence, and it's a very dangerous development. It's not world which we want to leave to our children. I'm afraid that last year we made this huge step to the past, but I hope that it's not that it's not final decision, that we still find the healthy energy in different countries to understand that we have to propose something instead, that we have to build a more civilized, more predictable, more safe future with clear rules for everyone. And I, as a human being, I don't know whether or not we will succeed, but I'm sure that this is our historical obligation to try to do it.
Yeah, we definitely won't succeed if we're not trying. And all of the speeches, the conversation we're having today, all of your activities, all of your things that you've done with the organization, with helping Ukrainians, these are creating examples for others to become human rights defenders. If you were to tell someone, this is a noble thing you're going to do, but there's something you have to accept about this job that you will take on as a human rights defender, what would you tell future human rights defenders that they would have to accept about taking on a mission like this?
Probably I will tell them my personal story. When I was student of law faculty, I told to myself I would never ever do something which connected with criminal law, because I have an empathy to people. I love people, and it will provide me harm and trauma to work with criminal cases. But when the war has started, I have no other choice, because we never choose the country in which we are born, the time in which we are born, but we can choose, will we honest, active citizens, so just passively waiting for rescuers to come, but we know that there are no rescuers. We are rescuers for ourselves.
Right.
And now I work not just with criminal law, I work with international humanitarian law, with the most horrible atrocities which you can't just imagine. And what my main lessons learned from my personal situation, that something which I treated as my vulnerability, my empathy, my love to people, has become my source of strength. Because a lot of people who tell that we are much more pragmatic, they can't even hear details of cases in which we are working on for 12 years, just even can't physically hear what Russians are doing with people. And we can work on it because we want to help. And first, what I will tell is that sometimes something which you treated as your vulnerability, it's not your vulnerability, it's your strength. And second, what I will tell, there is a huge difference between wishful thinking and hope. Because hope, it's not confidence that everything will be fine. It's wishful thinking that you have not even to try to do something, even if we are going through the tough time, miraculously, everything will be okay. No, it will not work like this. It's just wishful thinking. The problems will not vanish. The problems will become just more harder. Hope means different. In Ukrainian language, especially, hope translated nadia. Nadia means action. Hope, it's not a confidence that everything will be fine, but it's a deep understanding that all our efforts have a huge meaning. We must act. We are not hostages of the circumstances. We are participants of this historical process, and dignity provides us a courage to fight even in unbearable conditions.
I have a question about you personally. When institutions are limited in the way that they can conduct actions to make things consequential, outcomes of these actions are uncertain, personal costs are real. You've described those in detail for us and how heartbreaking they are. This really exemplifies the type of leader that you are. And how does a true leader like you accept that this is a responsibility that you still have to carry, even knowing that there's an unlikeliness that you'll see justice in your lifetime? Maybe. I hope you do. I hope it's next week. But the amount of strength that it must take to do this without a clear view of what will happen in the future.
I'm not a politician. Politicians, especially in democratic countries, they have this strategy planned just for electoral cycle. I'm a human rights lawyer. I have a luxury to work on long-term strategy. And probably I will try to explain it with our Ukrainian history. When I was a child, Soviet Union collapsed. So I was born in Soviet Union. And then people were released from prisons, and I got a chance to get acquaintance with Soviet dissidents. It was a movement of intellectuals from different fields. And one of the famous philosopher and writers, a former political prisoner of Soviet gulags, Yevgen Sverstyuk, he ingrained me into this dissident circle. And suddenly I appeared in the circle of fantastic people who say what they think and do what they say. It sounds very simple, but it's not common spread. People who had the bravery to stood up their voice against the entire totalitarian Soviet machine. Soviet movement was severely repressed. People were killed, jailed, put in forcible psychological treatment, but they didn't give up. And I was so inspired by this example that I decided to study law and to continue this fight for freedom and for human dignity. So it had a huge impact to my own life. But let's look to the impact to the region of this movement. This movement appeared in 16th in past century. And when we look to the electoral cycle, just 5 years after its emerging, we can say that they are losers because dissident movements were crushed, people were arrested, families were separated, careers were ruined, so they didn't succeed. But because we live in 2026 and can look to this movement through the historical perspective, we know that Soviet Union collapsed and we got a chance to restore Ukrainian independence only because in 60s they were fighting. So I, from those people who are not afraid to work for a long-term perspective. I'm not politicians. I don't need immediate benefits.
This conversation has been enlightening and super valuable. Obviously, you fight the good fight. You are working hard to make sure that those who are committing crimes against humanity, against Ukrainian people, are held to justice in some form. And I cannot tell you again how much I appreciate you joining me on the show. But above all that, I want to thank you personally and from all of us here and from my Ukrainian family for all that you do for Ukraine and all that you do for the world. And I hope that there will be glory and victory to Ukraine sooner than later.
Thank you very much for your solidarity. I'm very grateful.
Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and engage us in the comments to keep the discussion going. You can also visit us at our website at www.thechangeagent.studio. And you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.